I, Gerald, Nyaoma, Arita, do swear that the evidence I shall give before this joint sitting of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly and the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate on the matter under joint consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Requirements of Chapter 6 of our Constitution, and have you received clearance letters on the same? And maybe also take time to tell us whether you are a dual citizen, and if you have been mentioned adversary in any parliamentary report or charged in a court of law.
Chair, I can confirm that I received clearance from from DCI, KRA, Metropol, as well as EACC. I think there's a fifth one, helps as well. I'm not a dual citizen. I do not hold dual citizenship, and I've now been charged in a court of law. Thank you.
Have you been adversely mentioned in any report of Parliament?
No, Chair.
So, Mr. Arita, the top position you've been nominated for, that of Deputy Governor of Central Bank, tell us how your education, your work experience, and assignments that you've held before has prepared you or matches into the role of Deputy Governor of CBK, the position that you've been nominated for.
Honorable Chairs, I did prepare a statement to introduce myself. I don't know whether I could read it, just to introduce, covering all those areas. It will take about 3 to 5 minutes.
Since it is your own, rather than prepared statement, you can just introduce yourself,
okay,
your experience freely, yes.
I can do that. First of all, it's a privilege to be, again, before this committee, joint committee, for the vetting, and also to give my special appreciation to His Excellency the President for nominating me for the position of Deputy Governor, Central Bank of Kenya. By way of introduction, my name is Gerald Nyaoma Arita. I was born about 60 years ago, 1964. Actually, just turned 60 last month. In terms of my education background, I started primary school in a place called St. Mary's, Mosocho, went to high school, again in a Cardinal Tunga High School, and then joined university in 1988. I completed my Bachelor of Arts degree in economics with a first-class honors, and then got a scholarship to study at University of Cambridge, and I got a Master of Philosophy degree in 1990. I'm also professionally qualified as Certified Public Accountant, Certified Public Secretary, and an associate of the Kenya Institute of Bankers. In terms of career, I'm actually a central banker since I joined, since I started working in 1988. I joined in as a management trainee and rose through the ranks. And my first assignment as Director of Bank Supervision was in 2003 to 2007, where I was responsible for fostering stability in the financial markets. I left there, went and worked as Director Banking Services between 2007 and 2010. And there I was responsible for ensuring that the safety in the settlement and payment systems at the Central Bank of Kenya. I did it for about 4 years. Again, moved to be Director of Financial Markets, where I was providing leadership in implementation of monetary policy, managing foreign reserves, as well as raising government debt, in short. Those were the main responsibilities. And then, again, I was reposted to bank supervision in 2015 until October 2024, a period of about 9 years, again in the same position of Director Bank Supervision. Apart from the work experience, I've also been an alternate to the governor in various boards. I've been sitting on the board of SASRA Regulatory Authority. I've also been a member of the governing council of Kenya Institute of Bankers for about 5 years. Apart from that, as I joined, I went through various other responsibilities. I was an assistant branch manager at Mombasa branch. I was involved in the restructuring of National Bank in the 90s. And also, I also acted as head of internal audit at the Central Bank of Kenya. So I've got a wide experience in central banking. Maybe I'll stop there for the time being. Thank you, Chair.
As now, if this joint committee approves you as a deputy governor of CBK?
I think the extensive experience that I've had in providing leadership to take the position of deputy governor. As a leader, you have to make teams, you have to manage various teams so that they actually achieve the bank's objectives. In all those departments, I think for the last 20 years, I've generally been a head of departments. So really leading teams has been very critical. I've also been involved in taking initiatives that change the way payments, for example, are done in the country. Members will not know that the first person that Safaricom, Michael Joseph, met when they were introducing M-Pesa, it was me. And I had the choice of either chasing him away and telling him I don't deal with telcos, or listen to him. I took that initiative to listen to him and brought in different heads of department, went through the product, and eventually gave them a pilot license. I think that was one of my biggest achievements, because if I had not listened to Michael Joseph, and I think there was a financial director called Les Bailey, I wonder whether we would be where we are with M-Pesa now. So that's one of my greatest achievements. I think also the exposure being in different boards, like I mentioned SASRA, I've also sat on the CMA board as a representative of the governor. I've also sat on the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation as an alternate to the governor previously. I think those experiences have given me an understanding on governance and risk management structures that are required in institutions. Just to mention a few. Thank you.
Office?
No, Chair.
Are you a member affiliated to any political party?
No, Chair. But I'm a voter.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just do a few follow-up questions. Good governance, integrity, transparency, accountability, and the rule of law are sometimes critical issues of our national value and principles of governance. To what extent do your personal and work experience reflect these principles over your time in central bank?
I think I've had a lot of experience on the rule of law because of what we, especially as Director of Bank Supervision, you have to check whether the banks comply with the law. That's one aspect, and other statutes. In terms of coming in with new regulations and even amendments to the Banking Act, we have to ensure there's public participation before we roll out. Again, in terms of fairness and equity, again, trying to get to be fair and equitable in the actions that we take on the commercial banks. And really, that position, again, requires that your integrity is high, in terms of you're not compromised by the institutions, and ensure that they actually follow the law. Those are the main areas that have benefited from being a Director of Bank Supervision.
Okay. Have you ever been adversely associated with practices that depict biasness, favorism, nepotism in discharge of your duty while working for the bank?
No, Chair.
Okay. Now that you've said no, we have received a memorandum from one Mr. Daniel Murugu, who has shared in the memorandum that he had grievances at the time you were in charge of that, section with his SMEP Microfinance Bank, and you did not give any attention to that issue, and he suffered profusely, and that memorandum is in record with us. Do you recall such a person or such an incident?
Yes, Chair, I do recall that incident. It was around 2015, where Mr. Murugu wrote to the Central Bank and told us that we should withdraw the license of SMEP, we call it SMEP in short. And whenever a complaint is made to Central Bank, we'd write to the bank just to give them a fair hearing and ask them there's a complaint that you did not transfer this amount of money from this customer of yours to wherever you wanted to transfer. I think it was something like 600,000. And the bank responded and acknowledged and said it was maybe on, I can remember, about 5 days. One was a weekend. They were not a member of clearing house. They sent the instructions to their head office. It was not acted upon. They actually took responsibility and said, yeah, we were at fault for this. So we wrote to the customer and told him, can you engage the bank and solve this amicably? I do recall for those 5 days, the customer wanted to be paid 150,000 for 600,000 that was being transferred. The bank offered to give him, I think, 4,900 or something like that. But then he was not satisfied with that action. He really appealed to the governor, and we did prepare a summary and saying what actions we'd taken. We had told the bank to change its processes and procedures to ensure that that doesn't occur again. They promised they would join the clearing house, and we also agreed that we were going to check that in our subsequent inspections. I remember doing a memo to the governor explaining, because he actually appealed to the governor. And the governor, I remember saying, yeah, noted, you did, thank you for taking the action.
Okay. Would you be kind enough to let this committee know of your net worth overall?
I think on the statement I provided is 169, with one caveat, maybe. I put there 169, there's one figure.
169,000?
169
million. Shillings?
169 million.
Okay.
There is a figure that I have not valued my property where I stay in since I built. I bought the property in 2005 and built there. That's my current home. I put a figure of 25. I know it's conservative, but I don't have. That was the 5 million. I bought the property, the land, and the building about 20 million. So I have not really valued that one to the current market price. That's the only reservation I want to put there.
Okay, do you, over the last 3 years or any other time during your career, have you ever been charged in court of law for criminal liability?
No, Chair.
Have you ever been adversely mentioned in any investigatory report by Parliament at any time during your tenure on working with Central Bank?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Ariko, you want to go first?
Yes.
Congratulations. Is it Arita? Aboni, it is not Ariko, it is Arita. Probably we come from the same region. Chair, I have one or two questions. The first question is, despite the positive macroeconomic indicators, namely reduction in interest rates, slowing down inflation, and growth, good growth prospects in Kenya's GDP, Kenya still Kenyans still feel that the prosperity does not translate into money in their pockets. So my question is, why is this the case? And in your opinion, what should be done so that our Kenya citizens feel part of this prosperity? And more specifically, if approved, what policies will you propose to support it? And again, remember, you are in that particular institutions. What new thing that you'll add value, the value that you'll add to the institutions? Chair, the second one, integration of payment systems in our financial sector, and even including our government institution, is critical in deepening financial services. However, there is a serious concern among Kenyan citizens that the attempted close monitoring of financial flows within banks and mobile money by KRA in an attempt to expand the tax base is likely to reverse gains made and may result in the country going back to a cash economy. So in your opinion, how should the government balance expanding the tax base while enforcing data protection without reversing the gains in the deepening of financial services? Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Arita, respond to those questions first.
Thank you, Honorable Member, and quite a mouthful of issues there. On the macroeconomic indicators, I think despite the money not being in the pocket, we are starting to see some of the, let's say, the results of what has been done, especially with the lowering of inflation. And again, it's important to point out that the lowering of inflation has been caused by many other factors, improved weather, which has led to reduced food prices, especially in maize, wheat. If we compare the prices that were there initially, maybe a year ago and now, they are much lower. So that could be an indication, although not money in the pocket, but you're using less money to buy the goods. That's the way I'd look at it. Even in terms of energy prices, they've come down. There have been also efforts to reduce taxes on some imported foods, which really has helped to lower the cost of food. So indirectly, you may not see the money really in the pocket, but there's an effort that has reduced what you'd be spending on those items. So inflation has been good. Interest rates still a little bit higher. Again, we normally say there is for any economic activity taking place or any stabilization in an economy takes time to bring the money into the pocket. Why do I say that? As you intervene in the economy and make it a stable macroeconomic environment, then you'll have more investors investing in the economy. By the time they start producing, they start creating employment, we call it a lag effect. So it may be now that we are seeing those numbers coming down, but it will take some time before we get the benefits of those actions of the stable macroeconomic activity. In terms of what can we do to increase money in the pocket, I think in the past there have been efforts to try and give cash transfers to the vulnerable communities, the elderly ones, so that they are supported in whatever they want to purchase. If you did give it to the wealthy people, then they would just save it. So maybe targeting the vulnerable community with and elderly with the cash transfers would be one solution, which has been ongoing. Issues dealing with how we deal with infrastructure development, which creates employment. Given the limited space, I think the government efforts into public-private partnership arrangements would bring in new money that can help us build infrastructure and employ more people so that they can get money in the pocket. There could be also, some time back, we did with Kazi Mtaani, employing the youth, again, and women projects, so that actually goes directly to the people. I think I'll stop there unless there's something I didn't address. Mheshimiwa.
Chair, the savings in prices is what I wanted to hear from the candidate, because if you look previously, the prices of goods were very high. And now that the prices of goods have come down, those savings is what we say something is in our pocket as citizens of this country. Thank you, Chair.
The second.
So maybe wait, take the question with Senator Eddie's question.
It's just to further interrogate what Honorable Ariko is trying to get to. And perhaps I want to frame it differently. Sitting at the central bank, how do you see the role of the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee? Do you see it as currently effective with regards to what Ariko has asked? Because, you know, what is currently driving what you see as economic growth and the inflation that you see as becoming stable is more so on the fiscal side, which is the government has sought to cut drastically on spending. And even after cutting drastically on spending, what ends up happening is that it still spends whatever is remaining on running administrative functions of the government, which is why it doesn't then translate to the people. So how do you see the Monetary Policy Committee being effective in terms of financial stability, but then can be able to redirect the money into the pocket of individuals and the pocket of the larger populace, and price stability, which is what Ariko is talking about? Because a farmer who is in Kitale today has got a bumper harvest, they cannot get reasonable price for their goods. And then people who are getting imported materials from outside the country are still paying more for the imported goods that they're getting. So there's no proper price stability. Now, that's the first question, just to strengthen what Ariko was trying to ask. That I wanted to ask you, what would then be your role in terms of making sure that MPC is actually more effective in its policies? The second question now on my side would be interact with that in terms of now business that you've talked about. The question for business has been availability of credit from commercial banks. And the reason being, the government was doing a lot of borrowing when we started, the current administration. But that has drastically reduced also. In fact, in October, the bank reduced its central bank rate to, I think, 12. And when they reduced that, between October and now, we haven't seen a corresponding reduction of interest rates, or lending rates, if you may, in the commercial banks. Why do you think this is so? And what do you think you're going to do about that so that money can be able to go to small, medium enterprises and even the larger investors that I see the desire from you to be able to cultivate them to invest, but they can't because they're not getting lending resources from the commercial banks?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Arita, please members, let's try to be straight to the point, and not debate the matter. Mr. Arita?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and respond to Senator Okech. I think the first part is what central bank can do. And I think given where the inflation rate is now, there is scope to reduce the CBR further, so that that can act as a signal for the banks to lower their lending rates. So that's one of the measures that the central bank can take as a signaling. Of course, there are challenges, and that's what you raised about even if the central bank lowers the interest rate, will the government still have a high appetite for government securities and therefore look for higher interest rates, and therefore the banks would prefer to invest in government securities other than lend to the private sector. Now, there needs to be some coordination between the central bank and the treasury and really try and manage the rates at which the government is borrowing so that we get very, people who are very aggressive in bidding, we can cut them off. Because if you cut those ones who are asking for very high rates, then that means if they come next time, they'll become cautious because now their money is just held without earning interest. So there'll be a bit of coordination so that we can lower the cost of also the government borrowing. So that's one aspect. The issues you raised about what the central bank can do to sort of provide more liquidity into the market. And there again, there is the CBR. You can have issues dealing with we have cash ratio requirement which can be reduced as well. We do have open market operations where you can give reverse repos based on government securities. Unlike other countries, we need to expand the eligible securities that can be given to the central bank. In other countries, you could have things like good loans being brought to the central bank to give as security, which we don't currently have.
Mr. Arita, maybe you might not have gotten the
Sorry.
question precisely. What, in many words, both Dr. Ariko and Eddie were asking, there is a practice right now where the central bank lowers its interest rate, but there is no direct commensurate lowering of interest rate by commercial banks. Wait a minute. But where central bank raises its interest rate, commercial banks automatically the next day raises interest rate for its customers. So if given the opportunity, how will you make sure that the indicators by central bank as a regulator are at the same speed and with air of emergency as when it rises, commercial banks taking advantage, that commercial banks will also at the same speed lower the interest rate for its commercial customers. That is what you need to bring out in terms of effort, because that is where the bank is failing.
Why I was bringing the linkages with the government borrowing, the bank will have to make a determinant. Do I lend at that rate, or do I lend at what the government is taking as interest rates? So if the government is still borrowing at high interest rates, it will still say, for this borrower who's coming to me, I have an alternative investment where I can have higher return. I'm just saying, I'm just looking at how the banks will look at it. But
I want you to think of the bank
there's still
as
scope.
a regulator.
Yeah, there's still scope. And that's why in the recent past, we've come up with a risk-based pricing model for lending. And I think the scope there is to, rather than, one of the things that the banks take into account is the cost of credit. They take the operational costs and a risk premium to determine the rate that they charge the customer. I think there's scope there for us to change that formula and link it to CBR. And tell them, as you come with your rate, it should be linked to CBR as a factor. So that it's not only your cost, which is there. So even the CBR should be part of there as a factor. Then it will be more now aligned in terms of transmission, that when the CBR changes up, we can see the rates going. When it's coming down, it's coming down.
Okay. Honorable Munyoro?
If confirmed for this position, my question is on how you're going to provide for adequate credit to get to private enterprise, specifically small enterprises and medium enterprises. Because if you look at the profits being declared by banks, there are billions of shillings, and mostly from government security. Would you also be in a position to consider something like windfall tax? Because that's guaranteed revenue from government, and it's Kenyans' money. How?
Yeah, the name, which returns? Sorry, I didn't hear.
That I'm talking about how you will ensure that the bank's credit gets the private, small enterprises, medium enterprises. Also, looking at the profits that banks are declaring currently, they are declaring billions of shillings. That money, most of it, is from government securities, which means that is Kenyans' money. Shouldn't government have a responsibility of demanding a piece of that pie in terms of a windfall tax?
Thank you, Honorable Munyoro. Senator Halwale, and then you take those two questions.
Thank you, co-chairs. Co-chairs, Mr. Arita, you've been in the central bank the whole of your life. And I would like you to tell me at least 5 names, not more than 5, of Kenyans who you helped to develop in their career in the bank. Why? Because under the Central Bank of Kenya Act, the governor may assign you any responsibilities that is expected to carry. He is expected under this law to be responsible for appointment and promotion of staff. So can you give me these 5 people who don't come from your ethnic community that you helped? Our biggest problem in this country as leaders is how do we manage this animal called tribalism. My second and last question, Mr. Arita, is that listening to your long resume, you have been very senior in the bank. And I'm afraid, unless you convince us, we might not recommend you. Because these many years in the bank, you run the risk of being a Mr. Know-it-all, to the extent that you are not going to accept to work under the governor of central bank who has not grown in the bank, Mr. Tuge. And because of your seniority, my brother, you remember the problem we had in 2009 with the Deputy Governor Mwatela. Yes? When she completely was unable to work with Professor Ndungu, because Mwatela had grown in the bank like you, and when she was deputy governor, it brought a lot of problems. And finally, but not least, this is just to compliment you. I've always wondered who was in the bank at the time mobile money was introduced in the economy. I remember for the 2 years, 2008, 2009, the banks did not want to see mobile money. In fact, it had to take the intervention of then Minister Michuki to personally force the banks to accept. So I want to give you credit. I didn't know that you are the first behind the advice that you gave Michuki, and which completely transformed the lives of our small people in the villages, and lately even us. Now we're able to transfer over 500,000 shillings on the phone. Thank you.
Let me guide on the first question. We will not want to bring names of people who are not part of the vetting exercise to a discussion in Parliament. So you may try to demonstrate how you have mentored other professionals without necessarily giving names. We wouldn't want to bring them to, someone is busy working at the bank, then they are mentioned in a parliamentary proceeding and they are not the ones being vetted. It may not necessarily be good for them. Proceed, Arita.
Thank you, Chair. I think Honorable Munyoro brought for providing credit to SMEs, which really are important contributor to our GDP. There are certain efforts that can be taken. Again, looking at the SMEs, they are considered a little bit riskier than maybe the corporates. Some of the suggestions that can be made to improve is like the implementation of the Kenya Credit Guarantee Scheme, which reduces the risk profile for the SMEs. Then they can get lower rates from the commercial bank. That can be one of the initiatives. That one, I think, is critical because the banks look at SMEs as being risky. So how can you reduce the risk profile of the SMEs? And the only way you can do it is maybe having credit guarantee schemes, and therefore they're seen as less risky. In terms of windfall tax, I don't know whether that is possible, given that they're already paying taxes. If they make more profits, there'll be higher taxes that they will have to pay. So there still are some aspect of a windfall tax. Honorable Khalwale mentioned about, or asking in my life, whether I've mentored other colleagues. I would answer it in a different way. If you look at my career, I've moved from different positions. I'm just...
Return to, what do you call it? Answer the chair. Don't respond to...
No,
all the questions belong to the co-chairs.
Yeah, true. Thank you, Chair.
Don't exchange with Senator Halwale.
Thank you, Chair. I just like facing the person I'm addressing. But thank you, Chair, for that clarification. I was saying that because I've moved a lot in different departments, I've always tried to leave people who can take my responsibility after I've left. And actually, the way my principle is that I should make myself marketable to move by training people to take over my responsibility, not to be insecure. So, and that's why I think to a large extent, I've kept growing in the bank, or I grew very fast in the bank, because I was asked to set up like the National Payments Division. I did set it up. Other people came in. So throughout my career, I've been mentoring people who can take up my responsibility. Even despite leaving the bank about a month ago, I'm very confident that there will be somebody who can take over that responsibility. That's the way generally I would answer that question. In terms of working, I think I'm a team player. You mentioned the current governor, Dr. Thuge. I may want to mention that even before he joined the central bank, at one time I was asked to represent the central bank to go and market the first Eurobond in 2014. And we were the three of us. That was Dr. Thuge, who was a PS, there was a CS, Rotich, and I was representing the central bank. And we spent like a whole 7-10 days marketing the Eurobond in the US. So he's somebody I know, somebody I respect. He's also a professional like I do. I must say I'm always a team player. That's one of my ingredients. I know the responsibilities that I'll be allocated, have to handle them. And that's why I've also, for my teams, whenever I allocate them responsibilities, I expect them to meet those targets. So I don't think there's any fear for me not working with Dr. Thuge. Thanks again for the compliments on mobile money. In fact, I went around the world. I was appointed as an AFI Global Policy Champion, going around the world, talking to other central banks, telling them how we did it, and as an AFI Global Policy Champion. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Umi.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations, Mr. Arita, for your nomination. My question is, as you're aware, the financial institutions continue to contribute to the cases of pilferage of public money through the processing of questionable payments. If approved as the DG for Central Bank, what policies will you propose that will curb this kind of cases and make our financial payment systems strong? And as you're aware, the system, IFMI system, are notorious for payments that are what we call kulipa hewa, specifically county governments. They've mastered that art. So what will you do if approved by this House? Thank you.
Honorable Sunqueya.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One, describe your approach to ensuring compliance with banking regulation among financial institutions. Post strategies. Will you implement to ensure adherence to the regulation? Two, how can you elaborate on your understanding on risk-based supervision as adopted by CBK? How will you apply this approach to improve oversight on financial institutions? Thank you.
Can you respond to those first? Dr.
Chair, the question asked by Honorable Umu, just wanted to ask the candidate, what structures are you going to put in place to see that the payment system in our institutions, because central bank, all those institutions have an account with central bank, but what is being paid by these institutions, including county governments, they normally pay air during the abnormal periods. The abnormal periods is the period during the close of the financial year or during the December holidays. So how do you link the procurement process and the payment system? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arita.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honorable members. I think the first question is the role of financial institutions in curbing fraudulent transactions or public funds missing. Maybe the first question we need to really ask, who are those people who are put responsible for that? There are officials who are paid to ensure that money is not lost. So what actions are we taking to ensure that those given that responsibility, if I've been given the responsibility of deputy governor, I should be, my integrity should be high that I cannot process air. That's what I expect from that position. So whoever is given that responsibility, I think that's where we need to start. Are we putting people who are not, who are thieves? That's the first thing that we should ask ourselves. Because if you give somebody a key to your house and say you stole, and you expect the watchman to come and the time is already too late. So we need to put processes at the beginning that ensure that those things are not done. And there are technologies which can help us do that better. I know even at the central bank we've been introducing something we call an Oracle system, which monitors what is being done throughout, and anybody can check on that system. So we need to also have a bit of technology. At the central bank, I think we have to check whether institutions are adhering to the anti-money laundering laws that have been put in place to guard against money laundering and corruption, and misuse of public funds is part of that. And then, as a follow-up, those being investigated or people still are left with their normal lives, are they being prosecuted? So I think for the central bank, one of the issues that we want to do now is have a standalone teams that deal with ML, CFT, money laundering issues, as opposed to where we've put them together, that they do what we call prudential supervision, checking on the stability of the financial sector, as well with the ML. So it's sort of hidden. Best practice now requires that we have a separate unit that goes and undertakes money laundering inspection. So that's something that I would be willing to follow through. There was something on approach to risk-based supervision. Again, I was fortunate to be involved in risk-based supervision when in 2003 and 4. I was the first one to carry out a survey in the banking sector looking at the risk systems that the banks have, whether they have a different unit dealing with risk, whether they have a budget. It was published even in the newspaper. And we decided to do that to sensitize the banking sector. And for the central bank, we now have we call it a risk-based supervision approach, just to enhance our efficiency and effectiveness in supervising the financial institution. Just as in brief, it is where you look at a bank's risks exposures, where are they exposed to, and then you look at what are the controls that are there to mitigate those risks. You'll find some banks are very good at giving credit. Others, they have high levels of NPL, so you know these ones are a bit riskier. So that's how we use risk-based supervision. And then you target your resources and staffing to target those banks that you think are weaker. That's the way I would look at it. You asked something on adherence to bank statutes. Members may be aware that we've submitted amendments on enhancing penalties, for example, so that we can actually have more stiffer penalties for non-compliance of laws. There are other initiatives that I think can be put in place. Outreach to the boards of those banks, having training certifications, so that they are responsible on what they do, in brief.
Thank you, Honorable Makilap.
May I also take this opportunity to thank Arita for finding the eye of the President to nominate you for this position. Arita, you joined the Central Bank in 1988 when, as a management trainee, fresh from the university, with a lot of figure to succeed and change Central Bank. You worked for over 30 years until you retired just a few days ago, or some months ago. At your time of retirement, after 30-something years, did you feel satisfied that you've done your best in Central Bank and you wanted to rest? That's my question number one. If your answer is yes, that you wanted to rest, why apply this job? If your answer is no, what is the new thinking? What is it that is left that you've not implemented? Because I've seen you've done supervisory, you've done banking services, you've even done bank supervision, you've done everything. And you even you are an alternate board member, the decision-making organ of Central Bank. To me, you've done your best for many years. What else, new thinking, do you think you will inject to the market? Secondly, co-chairs, there are two deputies of Central Bank of Kenya. Which one, your experience, this one that you are applied, and the other one which is existing, which one is higher and which one is lower? Or are they equal, and what are their distinct roles? Because there are two deputies in Central Bank. We need to know, you know, in the political party system, there is first deputy or first deputy, second deputy. Which one is this one now? Do you think, like Arigo is a first vice chair of ODM? So that is my question number two. Number three, provide at least 2-3 examples of crises that you faced in Central Bank. Provide two or three examples of how you managed a financial crisis or fraud in Central Bank of Kenya or any economic downturn during your period of over 30 years. What strategies could you employ to ensure stability during economic downturn or uncertainty? Number 4, this country as of October 2023, there were 40 licensed commercial banks. I don't know whether they have increased or not. Nigeria has about 20 commercial banks. When you get favor from this committee and parliament for approval, what do you advocate? Do you advocate for merger of commercial banks and reduce the number so that you have a strong banks in the country, or you'll open up the entire sector so that you have 1,000 banks in Kenya? What's your take on the number of commercial banks in the country? Lastly, Chair, is in your experience of regulatory framework in Central Bank, this country today is faced with, there are commercial banks who are stubborn, even when Central Bank has reduced the base lending rate, they continue to be high. What penalties do you want to propose? Some penalty to this committee that you will do, that you will provide this kind of penalties when you get an opportunity to be appointed as a Deputy Central Bank of Kenya, and how you will manage these growing digital lenders, bitcoins, micro finance organizations, so that there is a favorable competition between lenders. Because the people of Kenya, the mamampokas of Kenya, are being chased left, center, right by digital lenders, by Shylocks, and many other quasi-lending opportunities, lenders, together with now a stubborn banking institution where they see an opportunity in lending only to government, because there they will have highest profit. Can you propose, including in your heart, what is the best interest rate this country can run with? I think basically that is the other question of putting money in the pocket. I think somebody has asked. So those are my questions.
Thank you. CP Arita?
Thank you. He did accept that with him, the way he's taking questions. First of all, allow me to congratulate the nominee, Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita. Congratulations. Coming this far is not a joke. You are one among the equals. Now, you are being vetted for a very senior position and a very critical position for the running of the affairs of the country, and more so the economic situation of this country. I just want to ask two bullet questions, very straight. One of it more or less related to what Honorable Maklab was trying to ask, but I don't know why he shelved from going straight to the point. There is ongoing current discussion in public on the proposed amendment on Central Bank Act, the issue of minimum capital core or deposits, core capital. So my sister here is helping me. The proposal is that the minimum core capital be increased from 1 billion to 10 billion. Already some persons are saying the time provided for around 3 years is too short. We need it 10 years, we need it 20 years. Somebody somewhere said we need it like yesterday. That's why Makalab is saying we need to reduce even the number of commercial banks existing and have few stronger commercial banks that can compete well and can be able to address the challenges. What is your take on this particular minimum core capital, for and against? And should you be appointed, what is your recommendation if it were you today in that office? The second one, as an economist, I've looked at your CV. You are also an economist, beside being my colleague accountant, a CPA like me, which I know you will do marvelous as an accountant from the financial point of view. But from the economic point of view, Kenyans have been taken through positive speeches from the implementers of the policies of the day that the economy of Kenya is doing well. We are doing well in the markets. We are doing well in production. We are doing well. We are now venturing into manufacturing. But the layman Kenyan is asking himself a question. When you tell me the economy is doing well, how do I feel this economy when there's no money in the pocket? How would you be able to help the Kenyans who are following your vetting today to unravel this mystery of saying economy is doing well, whereas the Kenyan is not feeling that economy? They wake up today in the morning, there's no money. They wake out, they move around, they use the hustle, you know, the word commonly is hustle. When they retire back to their beds, they go back empty-handed or handing is that they only afford to buy food for that night. What is this thing called economy doing well as an economist in line with the expectation of Kenyans? Or what are we going to do to convert this theory into reality? Thank you.
Lastly, Senator Faki, to close us off.
First of all, I wish to congratulate Gerald on his nomination as a Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. I have two issues. Number one is that of late there have been a lot of incidences of bank clients being defrauded by the banks in their accounts. I don't know what the bank has done to stop this growing problem. I remember even in the Senate, there were about 3 statements which were brought on this subject of banking frauds. Number two, from the county I come from, we had a lot of senior personnel working for the central bank. And currently, I think most of them have retired. Only 1 or 2 who are still in service. What is the bank doing, maybe to make sure that the bank, as a national institution, is represented by all regions in this republic? I know the bank has a branch in Mombasa, it has a branch in Kisumu. I don't know which other city. Eldoret also, yes. So what is the bank doing to make sure that we have this national representation in its employment cadres? Thank you.
Yeah, just a rejoinder of a very matter that came to my mind. I was working as a CEC Finance sometimes back before I was here. Chair and the co-chairs, probably chair from the Senate. I don't know whether you are aware the frustration county governments are going through to travel to Nairobi, come here for days, only for one approval to be processed, money, with this payment for recurrent and development. That is the Form C. You are aware of Form C, that they have to come here. Yet we have a central bank in Eldoret that can support the North Rift counties. They can work in the morning, by evening they will process. What is this bureaucracy that is not supporting devolution? Why is central bank withholding the aspect of supporting devolution? Because I find it is totally against the spirit of devolution. We have a central bank in Kisumu. We should have one in Turkana. We should have one. I mean, they are the bankers of the government, and we have 48 governments with 47 for counties. I don't know whether they are aware of this. So what is our nominee here? Can speak about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I think Honorable Maclap said I've been working for quite a long time, which is true. I don't think that by the time I retired, I was saying that now I can't work anymore. I think I feel still energetic. I'm also willing to learn. I'll just share that while I was on leave this 1 month, or while I'd retired, I was learning French, just to demonstrate that I'm always willing to learn. And I think as I get to the bank again, just providing leadership. As Honorable Faki said, there is a vacuum of people retiring. So can I also provide leadership and experience and mentor the ones that are coming on board? 2 deputies, I think that will be the responsibility of the governor to allocate the responsibility based on our various competencies. So I leave that. I don't think we will regard ourselves as who's senior or not. I think the aspect is getting the work done. That's the most important thing, irrespective of who's given any responsibility. Crises that I've held, several in the banking. One of them was Chase Bank, when we were closing Chase Bank. I got in the morning, stayed the whole night trying to resolve that institution. The next day I was in the office, I didn't go home. So for 36 hours, I was working. I didn't sleep for one night, and the next day. So that was how important we had to handle that crisis. I've managed some of the crises, like the takeover of Spire Bank by Equity, which was a major risk, especially for the teachers, because they were going to lose money. So I was directly involved in that one. In terms of number of commercial banks, and that's tied again to the issue of raising minimum capital requirements for the banks. One of the reasons why I recommended, I must disclose, that recommendation was done while I was in the central bank. So it came actually from my department. And the reason is for banks to consolidate. Forcing a bank that you should consolidate with this one is like forcing a marriage. And there can be other disastrous effects out of that. So you'd rather the market itself, you put in motions that can lead to consolidation. Because those ones who are unable to lead to meet those requirements, then they'll on their own accord work with somebody else to merge together. In terms of interest rates and again, what penalties we can have, it's not really penalties, but you can also withhold their corporate approvals. At times it's a delicate balance, because you want the bank to do well, and at the same time you want them to reduce their lending rates. So there are certain corporate actions that we can take, like if they wanted to expand, we tell them no until you address this issue of rates. Your rates have not changed. Or you want a new product. So there are other areas that we can look at. There was the issue of management of lenders and the high interest rates. I've recently read a new change in the EU regulations where the responsibility of someone paying, the lender has to demonstrate that they've actually checked your capacity to repay. So it's not on the responsibility of the lender, but on the borrower, the responsibility of the lender. Unfortunately, I think some of us can borrow while we are in the bar. Nobody can check whether you are able to repay. I mean, you just get it online. But there should be mechanisms with technology that enable you to establish whether that person is able to repay, so that we lower the cost of NPLs, which leads to higher interest rates. Because if I'm making losses on the loans I'm giving, then I'm going to charge higher to recover from the one that didn't pay. So what mechanisms can we put on the responsibility of the lenders to ensure that when they're lending, they're not making losses? And that can be considered in an amendment to an act or something like that. I think CP Ruto asked about minimum capital requirements. I think I've done that. What's the take of the recommendation? Positive impact of laymen Kenyans, especially with the economy doing well. I think I did mention that takes time to reap on the benefits. Just like the president said, if you plant maize, you'll only harvest it after a few months, not immediately. So it takes time for even investors to come into the country because they can see there's a stable macroeconomic environment for them to earn a rate which is not devalued by the inflation rate. So by the time they realize there's a stable macroeconomic environment, then they can come invest in the country. We'll start seeing employment opportunities, and therefore Kenyans will start seeing the benefit. Senator Faki, bank clients defrauded in their accounts. I think we need to also sensitize more on the Kenyans to take care. I've seen the banks, we've pushed the banks to sensitize their customers, use of PIN, all those issues. We require the banks to do penetration testing every year so that they can seal up the loopholes that they have. And also in terms of vetting of staff joining the commercial banks, because some of those frauds are internally generated. An important thing that I think we'll have to set up is a cyber security operations center for the banking industry, where the banks will be sharing information of how that type of fraud went, so that you can share the information with the other banks, because most of them hold the information to themselves. And again, their fraud happens in another bank, the same formula. So they need to set up a cyber security operations center that you can share some of that information to the other industry players would be beneficial. The representation of the central bank in various regions, apart from the 4 branches that we do have currency centers, Meru, Nakuru, Nyeri, and Kisii, which was about 2-3 years opened. So I think the scope to increase those branches. Unfortunately, CPA Ruto mentioned that they have to come here. I thought some work had been done on that, to go to the counties, and some governors were met to sort of improve the working relationship. There is technology which can be used to have more efficiency. That's what I can say.
Chair, he just closed over it. He said that currency center, and apart from the 4 branches, there are currency centers. But my question was specifically on the employment opportunities to people in those branches, people from those regions, because there is no, there's no sense of ownership. That here we have a central bank in Mombasa. In fact, it's one of the biggest branches. And then all the people working there, for instance, coming from Kakamega, where my brother comes from. I don't think that will be right in line with the Constitution and in line with the national cohesion and integration. Thank you.
Makilap?
Point of order, Chairman. To localize CBK in their respective places.
No, I hear Senator. He's just saying that.
Hold on, Bana, bank, how you could ensure that there is fairness, not necessarily getting people from Mombasa, but fairness, so that you do not have some particular people, now that maybe you come from now a particular area, now you find now that now there will be more people from your area, when you are becoming deputy governor, you're seeing in some institutions. Honour Makila?
Chairman, he answered part of my question properly, of incidences that he faced in Central Bank, but it did not answer the other part that I asked him. What could be the measures that you take when you face an economic downturn in Central Bank so that people do not lose their money? And the other Chairman, is you want to be a deputy governor of Central Bank. Government borrow from Central Bank, what is called an overdraft by the government. Suppose the government exhausts the overdraft and they don't repay. What do you do? What do you do as a deputy governor of Central Bank? And lastly, Chair, remember this committee First Central Bank and the Central Bank of Kenya recently awarded a significant contract to a company called Gisek Dividend Currency Technologies to bring in Germany, to bring new currency notes without publicly disclosing contractual agreement or tender documents. In light of this situation, how do you justify the decision to utilize a classified procurement process? What measures could you advocate as a deputy governor to ensure transparency and accountability in significant financial dealings of that magnitude? Remember, the tender was about 14 billion to print currency worth 8.4 billion. Just by, because you were in Central Bank at that time.
Chair.
Dr. Arita?
Top up. Chair, I just want to add something on what Maklapa said on the printing of currency. How secure is printing of currency? And to make it worse, it is now being printed in Germany. Because if Ariko has authority over the people in the central bank, I can decide to go to Germany and ask the company to print something aside for me. Then I fly to Kenya. So how secure are we in terms of printing of currencies?
Because, Chair, we left it that the Kenya government had shares and went to a foreign country, Germany, and you were in Central Bank. Elaborate.
Chair, honorable members, just...
I did not fail.
Honorable
the
members.
response on the core capital came out very well. You just brushed it off. It never came, and it's a very critical discussion now.
Okay, I think we conclude at that in terms of the questions for purpose of managing time, because there's also another committee that's planning to use this room. Mr. Gerald, Arita, where questions were asked for you to clarify with clarity, please go ahead and respond to them, and the other follow-ups as asked. Thank you.
Maybe I'll start with Senator Faki. I do hear you in terms of national cohesion values that the central bank should put in place. I'll freely disclose that I know it was raised even in the last audit that we need to have a register of who has been employed and get the ratios so that when we go to implement recruitment, then we look at that as well. So that is a measure that we need to put in place. CPA Ruto asked about whether the period given, whether it should be 3 years, 5 years. I think we have to look at it that why are we increasing those rates now, I mean the capital now. And the reasons have been very clear: climate issues, technology, NPLs are high. So just to mitigate the risks going forward. As to the time period, we did suggest that it can be phased out in 3 years, now depending on the institutions. So we've given that as an option. I'm sure the banks will come back and say, okay, give us longer. I think members here will have to review and see what is the case, and maybe also call us and say, is this reasonable? So again, the scope there for discussion. That's the way I would put it. In terms of crisis, Honorable Makilap, yeah, we need to review even the way we pay, like, for example, depositors. The amount that is paid to depositors, is it adequate in terms of crisis? Put in place a crisis management framework. We did get technical advice from the IMF towards as I was leaving, and they were even recommending that we have a financial stability department in the bank to address those issues of shocks that would come, covering so that if, for example, the banks can't pay the depositors, can the government also come in to save the big banks? So those are discussions that we are having with technical assistance from the IMF. The overdraft, it's in law. The government cannot borrow more than 5% of their previous revenue. So once it gets to that, they have to manage. So we can't break the law because that is put there. In the early 90s, the government went borrowing from the central bank, and the issue on inflation, that's why you saw over 100% inflation. So once that happened, that's why the law was put to manage that. The currency contract, yes, I was at the central bank, but not directly dealing with the currency. So the aspects of, I don't know, you mentioned classified, or I think you mentioned something. I'm not privy, but what I would only generally say, in all, if I was involved in procurement, then I have to go with the procurement law as it is. If it allows for a particular mode of tendering, then that's one, then we can use that. That's the way I would look at it, that at all times we need to follow the procurement law.
Thank you. There was a concern maybe a few days ago that maybe there was not enough liquidity in our banks, and there was a lot of information going on in the public that people should go and withdraw their money because there is a liquidity crisis. Maybe what would be a comment on it?
Sometimes saying there's no liquidity. That's why I wanted to find out what is the meaning. But liquidity as it is, we measure liquidity as the ability for the bank to repay the customer. And we have certain ratios that they're supposed to meet. We call it the minimum liquidity requirements for banks, which is generally every bank should meet 20%. And that comprises of either cash, foreign currency, government security, which it can discount to pay. And overall in the sector, the current percent is 54%. So they are liquid enough to pay any depositor.
Okay. So I think it's very important to notify the members of the public that the communication that has been going around that there is not enough liquidity in our banks is actually false. It is propaganda and it is fake news. The liquidity in our banks stand at more than 54%, quite higher than even global average, and quite high, much higher, more than double the required 20% percentage. So Kenyans, do not be worried. Your money in the bank is safe. There's no need for panic withdrawal.
Yeah, should you be considered, when I get Arita, there are also other emerging issues where banks are arbitrarily reducing the amount of money that you can access by M-Pesa from your account. And there's been recent notification where the banks, case example, APSA, have said we've reduced the amount that you can access by M-Pesa from your account to this, so that it is not discretionary to the banks to limit. It's important that a policy position be put in place so that it guides the banks, rather than the bank saying today the limit you can withdraw by M-Pesa from your account is X, and then tomorrow is X that way. Then we need to get, as a regulator, we need to get a bit of guidance so that that is also guided across the globe. I think we've come to a conclusion of our exercise today. Evidently informed, about the central bank processes and issues based on our engagement with you. Now it's the chance for us to give you an opportunity to ask any question, any concern, any statement you want to make before we conclude.
Maybe, Co-Chair, perhaps before you do, the discussion about virtual assets and blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, Kenya is one of the largest users in Africa. And any drive to try to legalize this, the Central Bank of Kenya has not come out very clear on what your stand is, on the stand of the bank on this this digital currency and virtual assets and all that space. So from experience, what do you think the bank should do, and what strategic direction you did as a bank in this area?
I think the issue of virtual assets, it was one of the reasons that Kenya got grey-listed, because it was seen that there's some Kenyans who are dealing with virtual assets. Subsequently, a task force was formed under the National Treasury to come up with policy recommendations on how those virtual assets should be handled. I know about a week ago, all the regulators met in Mombasa to review the recommendations of that technical team, and thereafter the paper will be going to cabinet. Fortunately, they have missed the developments that have been going now. So there's work that has been done on that. On the chair's recommendation that how the banks deal with their customers, I think they need to improve on that. They should actually be informing you why they're making those changes. Maybe it's for your good, maybe somebody wants to target you and remove more money, so they're limiting the risk exposure. That, yeah. I think, yes, sometimes we want to leave them to review their own risks. How do they understand their risk profile? The way we were talking about risk-based supervision, are they seeing their risks? And how do they want to minimize the risks to the customers? Yeah.
Now, do you have any question for the panel members?
No, Chair. I think it's just to appreciate the conversation and discussion. I think you've given us a bit of work to think about and get back things on how to deal with reducing lending rates, how to improve lending to the SME sector, and even things that can enable us work better. So I would want to appreciate the committee, and thank you for having me here. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. We'd like to thank